progressives.org site. You can just about find it just as easy by Googling it, of course. You'll find it pretty fast. So if you have any questions, we'll take them now. If you want to direct them specifically to one candidate or the other, why, let us know. And I'll be happy to answer anything you have.
I have a housekeeping issue. That first clipboard that came around, some of us signed it because we thought it was the sign-in for the progressives. I don't know what I signed.
Oh, I don't know what it was either.
Oh,
Did you send something around?
John.
We sent something around.
What was that?
That was just a sign-up sheet, so we can stay in touch.
Mine was always here.
Yeah.
Do you need the this one?
It's easy to correct.
No, I signed that. Two. I said that. Okay.
Satisfied?
Thank you. I just like to know what I signed.
Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the Attorney General's office can do to protect the environment. How does that work? It's kind of vague question.
Well, the Attorney General has the ability to initiate action in antitrust, consumer protection, and public nuisance. And public nuisance would be environmental. The Attorney General can protect the public trust doctrine, and basically the public trust doctrine allows a lot of, enforcement of our environmental laws when you're dealing with different navigable waters and our water rights. So it is one of the areas in which the Attorney General can be very proactive. Peg Lauberschlager was very proactive in protecting the environment as Attorney General. She is our last Democratic Attorney General. She has endorsed me in this campaign.
Yeah. That's true. I guess I would also add that the Attorney General has the ability to act on referrals from the Department of Natural Resources in addition to taking original action. And that's something that we need to look at now at a time when we have frac sand mining, for example, basically destroying the land in many parts of Wisconsin, and certainly being aggressive, where we have companies coming in and very aggressively sometimes rewriting the safety codes or health codes for certain towns to get what they want. I think someone needs to be looking at the broader view about what's happening to our land, what's happening to our water, our groundwater because of those issues. I think those are very, very important issues that we need to be looking at. I guess what I bring into the picture is a very long track record of working to help our environment, especially waterways. That's been a particular focus of mine. My legislative district abuts the Great Lakes, and that's just a personal passion of mine. We've been doing quite a bit to maintain the integrity of the Great Lakes. But for all of our waterways that are under enormous stress, either through high capacity wells or the threats of frac sand mining, that's something that the Attorney General's office really needs to be involved with looking at. And as your Attorney General, we'll make sure that that gets a very hard look and that we stand up for our rights to a clean environment here. Yep.
Did you talk about heroin addiction?
I did. Yes. That is a very, very serious problem, and something that many counties in the state are facing. And some counties, if you go in the west, are still dealing with quite a bit of meth. But most counties in Wisconsin are facing a heroin problem, and it's hitting our counties in a couple of ways. First is an incredible spike in heroin deaths, opiate-related deaths. I was just at the Ozaukee County Heroin Summit a couple of weeks ago, where 600 people showed up. And we heard story after story about people who become addicted, and when you buy heroin off the street, people don't know what the dosages are, and so over and over again, you're seeing these horrible cases of ODs. I was talking to one at Ozaukee County who lost her only daughter to that, and that is something that is reaching many, many families around Wisconsin, and in many different types of neighborhoods around Wisconsin. And that's something that gives us reason enough to get involved with it. But we're also learning that garbage is coming into our state in a couple of main pipelines, one coming up through here in Rock County, through the Chicago area and from Rockford, another coming up from Chicago and coming up from the Milwaukee area and the eastern part of the state. And we need to do a much better job of addressing the trafficking of heroin and using the resources of the Department of Justice to stop that from coming into the state, and supporting the efforts to make sure that people can get off heroin once they get on it, and We've had some good legislation that's passed recently to help victims of heroin abuse either survive a heroin overdose and provide a safe harbor for people to report in a heroin overdose. But I still think that we need to prosecute people who provide heroin to a friend or sell to anybody. And that's something that we definitely need to continue doing here in Wisconsin.
Did you have a specific question regarding the heroin?
No, just wondering how you're going to reduce the amount of heroin, the drug overdoses and so on. I mean, it's just, the statistics are very alarming.
The heroin that we're seeing now is more potent than it was in the past, and it's a lot cheaper. The problem we are having with heroin and opiates is not just with heroin. We have many people in our communities who are becoming addicted to opiates through legitimate means. They have a car accident, they have a sports injury, they are introduced to pain meds through their doctor. And by the time they figure out that they're addicted and they are looking for the opiate, their legitimate means of getting it is gone, which would be probably through another prescription or a refill. And that's allowing them to then turn quickly to heroin, which is much cheaper than trying to buy the pills on the street. So we need to actually be doing a lot more than just cracking down on the heroin coming into our community. In Dane County, what we are doing is we've been talking with medical professionals and doctors about how they prescribe pain meds. And do they need to give a prescription of 30 or 60 pills to any one person? Should there be more contact with the physician? Now, a lot of the structure we have with how prescriptions are given is because of your insurance companies and how they handle co-pays. And for the most part, when you're talking about, most of your drugs that are not addictive, that are not opiates or painkillers, however they want to do the copay is fine if they give you the number of prescriptions that you need to get through whatever dosage you're going to be on the penicillin or an antibiotic. But when you're talking about an opiate or a painkiller that's highly addictive, that's a different story. I don't know if you noticed in the news just a few weeks ago, the drug companies are just ready to actually introduce the newest painkiller, which is 100 times more powerful than what we've had on the market today. And right now, the drug does not have any time delays built into it, as they have with put into the other opiates to try and make it less of an ability to tamper with or abuse. So we need to be looking at a lot of things. In Dane County, we partnered with parents to put information on a website, because when you have a child that comes into the system for whether it be prescription fraud, whether it be possession of actually heroin, the parent is not considered a victim. So we do not have an ability to confer with them as you would and as the law would dictate under Chapter 950, the Victim Rights Bill. So we've put information on a website so that they can understand what is going to happen in the process. Now, we have a very complex problem here, because most people, if you hear something has killed somebody, are going to go that way. You're going to go away from that danger. A heroin addict is going to go to the danger, because that is saying that is very good drugs, that is very strong drugs, and that's what they want. So that is a problem, because you have sellers who are actually marketing that their product has killed somebody, and other people are actually coming to get that. Now, you have legislation out there that's talking about people not being prosecuted for possession of heroin if they are going to call in the death of another one, or the overdose, because you want them to call paramedics as soon as possible. I can tell you, we are not necessarily looking to prosecute people for possession. In those situations, you are looking at prosecuting somebody for a reckless homicide. I don't know if any of you remember Lynn Bias, but Lynn Bias died. He was a star basketball recruit. He basically took cocaine after he was drafted and died. And the reckless homicide statute came into play after that for the person who had provided him with that drug that killed him. That is what prosecutors look to prosecute somebody for who has been involved in a drug overdose. People with possession, we may charge, but for the most part, people with simple possession, you are trying to move them into drug court. There are a number of drug courts around the state now. Dane County has one. I believe Rock County has one. Many places have it. A lot of that is a diversion. We are looking to bring this person into the system, have some authority over them to get them into counseling, and if they successfully complete, many times that felony charge is reduced to either a misdemeanor or completely dismissed. But that is how we are at least trying to bring them into the system to actually have some access to counseling.
This is a different tack. Does the Attorney General have anything to do with the problems with the sand that they're?
Sand fracking?
What?
Sand fracking?
Frac sand money?
Mining.
That they're drilling out of the ground and on the western state in order to take it up to where the mine is? Would the Attorney General have anything to do with that?
When you're talking about the environment, when you're talking about possible pollution, or when you're talking about the impact that a high-capacity well is going to have on a community, I believe the Attorney General would be looking at public nuisance, which is an area where they could initiate action to address those concerns.
Because
Yes.
they're trying to change the laws now so that the smaller towns can't do something that would protect themselves anymore.
They have looked to try and whittle away at the local authority to set regulations. And I think you need to protect local authority because those are the people that are boots on the ground. Those are the people who are there to keep an eye on what's happening. Those are also the people that are there to do the balancing test on whether or not this economic interest is in line with the community as a whole, as well as whether or not those who are bringing this business in are protecting the environment and protecting the community.
Right.
I have two questions. One is to go back to your heroin thing, but in relation to drunk driving laws. Where do you see the position of getting mandatory treatment for multiple offenses of drunk driving versus jail time? And then the second would be, God forbid Scott Walker gets reelected. Where do you see both of your roles in working with someone like that in the legislature?
Well, first I would say,
Take drunk driving first and then.
yeah, we can do that. First, I would say when you're looking at drunk driving and when you're dealing with heroin, we are seeing a lot more driving while under the influence of heroin. We are seeing people fall asleep in traffic. We are seeing people hit people after they have just shot up. That is a serious issue. There is currently no number of offenses that you could have that would stop you from ever, at some point, regaining your ability to drive. Mandatory treatment, there is a mandatory requirement for an assessment and treatment after that, potentially, for every OWI. So even when you get your first, you need to go through a driver safety plan. You need to basically have that checked off with the Department of Transportation. Now, your second question, I fully believe if I'm elected Attorney General, I'll be standing next to a Democratic governor. That said, the Attorney General, the nice thing about the Wisconsin Attorney General is they're standalone. They are the people's attorney. They are not like the federal system tucked under the executive. So no matter who would be governor, my job wouldn't change. My main cause, my main goal, protecting the rights of the citizens of the state of Wisconsin, would not change. But I do believe if I'm elected, I'll be standing with the Democratic governor.
Yeah, and drunk driving, I was named legislator of the year by Mothers Against Drunk Driving this year. So I do believe that we need to tighten up our drunk driving laws as this year's Attorney General. That's one of the things I'll definitely be talking about, and that is one of the differences between me and my Republican opponent. I believe that we should criminalize first offense drunk driving. I actually have a bill introduced to do exactly that. He doesn't agree we should go that route. One of the reasons why I think we should do that is because you look at the people killed by drunk drivers, most of those drunk drivers have never been cited. So what we have to do is make sure that we get serious about addressing first offense drunk driving. After that, I think one of the most effective things we can do is to expand the use of ignition interlock devices, which is something that I've been involved with this year, actually working with a couple of our colleagues to expand that. And I believe we should do that for first offense drunk driving too. The ignition interlock device is a device you can put in your car. You literally have to breathe in the tube to get it all clear on your breath before you can start your car again. I think that it's been shown to be very effective in reducing the recidivism in drunk driving. Currently, we have them in place for higher offenses of drunk driving. I think we should do that from the very beginning to protect people. I think that would be a great first step. And we have to make sure that we address drunk driving in Wisconsin. It's a very, very serious problem. It's a public health problem for sure. It's a public safety problem, and we need to get serious about it. In terms of the Attorney General's relationship with the governor, I think what we're seeing now is, I think, kind of an unhealthy example of what happens when that relationship gets too cozy. In my opening remarks, I talked about the investigations that have been going on, where the Attorney General has not performed their historic role, and to come in and be an even-handed applier of the law, and someone who worked with the Buck Party. You saw that when Jim Doyle was Attorney General, and Washington was Attorney General, and who the governor is. The Attorney General needs to have their own voice and be someone who's going to actively investigate wrongdoing in public office, or and take maybe a hard look at the constitutionality of some of the things coming down the tracks that are passed by the governing legislature. I think that's part of the job of the Attorney General, which we haven't talked about yet tonight, is the issue of applying the Constitution to the laws. One issue that's out there right now that is very much alive is the issue of marriage equality in Wisconsin. And I back marriage equality. I would not support the laws that we have in place that discriminate based on same-sex or opposite-sex marriage. I think those want to follow the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. And in court cases all around the country, in Virginia, in Oklahoma, in Nevada, all around the country, Kentucky, you're seeing federal courts come down decisively on that same result. And I think that's something that I think will come to Wisconsin. I was disappointed the Attorney General looked the other way. And one of the things that's coming up in this race is there's a discussion about whether the Attorney General decides to defend or not defend certain laws. The Attorney General, first of all, has to look at whether the laws track with the Constitution. And our current Attorney General, for example, has decided not to defend the domestic partnership law that's on the books right now, because he felt that that violated the state constitution. I disagree with that, but that was his call. I would look at it another way. I think it's important that the Attorney General stands for rooting out discrimination, that we stand for having a fair and even-handed society. And now the big question that we have is on marriage equality, and that's something that I will certainly defend as your Attorney General.
Well, it's glad that my opponent is coming along to where I was straight out of the gate. When you talk about criminalizing first-time drunk driving, I think I was the first and the only to come out right away and say, listen, the conduct is so dangerous that I in good conscience cannot say that it shouldn't be criminal. Now, if we are going to talk about making it criminal, we also need to talk about the 16,000 OWI firsts we had last year, and bringing those into the criminal justice system. Now, currently, we are, by the state's numbers, down 214 prosecutors. And that's by a workload analysis the state did in 2009. Now, it's up to the legislature to determine how many prosecutors we have, because in the 90s, the legislature made prosecutors state employees. And they did this to help smaller counties. They did that because it was costing counties to pay for prosecutors. And the state wanted to make sure that counties had experienced prosecutors, that they could make a career out of it, because they understand experience matters. Now, I currently, running the second largest county's district attorney's office, am staffed for prosecutors at 1985 staffing levels. in a county that's grown 46%. We are just now unofficially over 500,000. Law enforcement in our county is growing 103%. So when we're talking about being tough on crime, and I think we need to be tough on crime but also smart on crime, we also have to talk about adequately funding the criminal justice system. Because when you don't have enough prosecutors, it's hard for us to confer with victims. It's hard for us to maintain the same level so that we can make sure that victims have their rights looked out for, that we are as prepared as we need to be. And right now, what I would tell you is that prosecutors' offices are doing this because of the experience and the prosecutors they currently have. That is an issue that the legislature needs to take up and needs to actually put funding towards. That is a public safety issue. And as Attorney General, you don't control that, but you should be a local proponent for adequate criminal justice resources being put in to the frontline prosecutors if you want to affect public safety in everyone's community.
Yeah, and I agree with that, and certainly in this year, I worked with Governor Walker. I don't agree with him on a bunch of anything, but we did agree that it was time for frontline prosecutors to get raised for the first time in 10 years. So worked with Governor Walker to put that in the budget. It stayed in the budget. When it came to the Joint Finance Committee where I served, unfortunately, some Republican colleagues took it out. We worked with a bipartisan group of prosecutors around the state to bring it back in, and now it's back. And that's the kind of advocacy I want to do to address this issue, the staffing issue of prosecutors around the state. And that's something we can talk to certainly David O'Leary here in Rock County, but around the state. That is something that is a huge and serious problem. I have a proven track record of working with anybody who wants to come together and work with goodwill. I give you the job down on prosecutor pay. That's why I was named one of the champions of the year by the Association of State Prosecutors, and that's why I wanted to be advocating for that for the Attorney General. The Attorney General does have a strong belief public on this issue, and he needs to be an advocate for the local prosecutor, and that's something I would take very seriously to do. Yes.
Well, I think the most disturbing thing for me at the present time is these voter ID laws, voter suppression.
Just today, after a whole other round of them that passed. Yeah. Well, I think the right to vote is the fundamental right in our democracy, and that's something that we have to be very zealous. I mean, people march for that right. They went to jail for that right. Some people died for that right.
Right.
Certainly, anyone who served as a veteran, like you,
Yeah.
that's something that people shed blood for. Absolutely. And so, when we're talking about restricting access to the polls, that's something we should be very cautious about and do only in the most egregious circumstances. And I think right now, it's become almost a political sport to rein in the ability to vote. So the latest effort was to rein in early voting and to rein in programs like Souls to the Polls, where we go and we take people and go on voter drives and bring them to an offsite polling location and have them vote. I think that would be great. People have talked about the issue of voting in some smaller communities and talk about having one polling location in other communities. I come from the city of Milwaukee, a city of 600,000 people. And for that entire city, there's one offsite polling location, early voting polling locations, people coming from all parts of town to vote. Compare that to a much smaller community, and where you maybe have 30,000 people, it's much easier to get to the early polling location. And I guess my point is that no matter where you live in Wisconsin, in a big town or a small town, you should be able to get to the polls and you should be able to cast your vote. And that's something we should be expanding in Wisconsin, not contracting. I mean, as the Attorney General, it's one of your responsibilities is to ensure voting rights. And one of the things that the current Attorney General has not done, and my opponent says he's going to follow right along, is stand up for the right to vote and make sure that if anyone is engaging in voter intimidation or voter suppression, that gets a hard look and gets addressed. And that's something that I certainly will do as your Attorney General. I think it's something that is absolutely important. And you're just seeing over and over again the attack on voting and making it harder to vote.
I'm not sure if did you have a specific question, or was that just your comment and wanted our
Well, I guess I was thinking how you both would stand on that issue, and And from what I'm hearing, I really haven't heard from you yet, but from what I've heard so far, it sounds like you feel basically the same way, that anything that interferes with people's right to vote, it's nonsense, ridiculous.
I think we always have to be careful when you put another hurdle in the way of someone exercising that most essential right, that right to have their voice heard. And a lot of what's fueling that sort of push is this talk about election integrity. And I will tell you this, right now, the 71 elected district attorneys around this state, there are 71, even though we have 72 counties, because one office covers two counties. We handle voter fraud, and when we find it, we will prosecute it.
There's not that much, is there?
There is not that much. There is not. And the other reason, when you have voter fraud, it's caught by the clerks. It's not caught on election day. It's not caught at the poll. It's caught when the rolls are checked. The clerks find it, and then they refer it to the elected district attorney in their county. Now, what you have as well is the law has changed. When you're dealing with voter fraud, it goes to the county of residence. And it goes to the county of residence because the last large scandal we had with the caucus scandal with the legislature, and many people, Republican and Democrat, were charged and received felony convictions.
I remember that.
Except for the Speaker of the House at the time, I believe, Mr. Jensen, who appealed. He did not appeal his misdemeanor conviction, but he appealed the felony conviction. And by the time it worked its way up and came back from the court, the law had changed, and now those laws are handled in county of residence. So when he got back to Waukesha County, it was handled by the Republican candidate in this race, the Waukesha County District Attorney.